Students, I got an email this week, actually today even, asking me to create a video that would explain some specific things about functions and their relationship to graphs. Specifically, this student wanted to know how to determine the range, the maximum and minimum value, the domain, how to find specific values on the curve. Specifically, she asked for f of 2, so that's the example that I will also pose in my demonstration today. And then finally, she wanted to know more about the vertical line test and how to determine, using that test, if the graph was a graph of a function. Let's take a look now at our two examples that I'll give you. Let's look at our first graph. Now, first of all, let's examine the range of this graph. In other words, how high does it reach and how low does it reach? The range of the graph, this graph, if you look at my y scale here, would go all the way up to about +5. And if you go down to the bottom of the graph, it goes down to about -3. So the range of my graph here could actually be defined as everything from -3 to +5. How about the domain? The domain of this graph goes all the way back to here, all the way back to -7. And on the other side of my graph, it goes all the way over to +9. So the domain of my graph could be defined as all numbers between -7 and +9. The maximum value that this particular graph reaches is +5, of course, and the minimum that it would reach would be -3. The maximum and minimum on these functions is always determined to be the highest and lowest y value specifically. The next question was, what is the value of f of 2? So if I look at my graph, let's write that out so you can see it. F of 2 equals what? Will be the way you see it on the test. Well, here's my 2. Let's come down, straight down, and see that that value is approximately -3. So I can safely say that the function value when x equals 2 is approximately -3. Or the way I usually state that in class is to say that f of 2 equals -3. And finally, the last student that was posed to me, is this a function? And specifically, it needs to pass the vertical line test. Remember that to be a function, for every x value, there can be one and only one y value. So obviously here at 9, there is only one value, and say at 5, there's only one. At 2, I showed you that there was one. At -1, there's only one. At -3, etc., etc., etc. There is no place where I could do any of these vertical lines where it would pass through the graph more than one time. So this is indeed a function. Let's take a look at a second one now. This is a rough sketch of a parabola, and let's pose the same questions again. What is the range of values? Well, in this case, I would suggest that it seems to reach about 4.5. And on the negative side, I would say it reaches as far down as -4. So in this case, I would say my range would be all the values from -4 up to about 4.5. By the way, you may have noticed that I'm using brackets on all of these. On a test, I would actually accept a parenthesis as well, because it's not quite clear as to whether or not those actual exact values would be included. I'm assuming that they are here, so I'm going to go ahead and use a bracket, but it's equally acceptable to me if you use the parenthesis. Now let's talk about the domain. That's actually a more interesting question here. It obviously goes all the way back to -3, but you'll notice the arrows on the end imply that this parabola just continues on and on and on forever and ever and ever. So there's really not a maximum value on the x-axis. So for my range, I would say it would be down to and including -3 up to infinity. Now remember, you can never have something that's exactly equal to infinity, so on this side you absolutely have to use a parenthesis. Now, another thing I need to point out about this, since it is a parabola and since it goes down and up forever, it will never actually reach a maximum or a minimum value. So there are no maximum or minimum values on this graph. And let's talk again about the value at f of 2. Well, this time, notice it's going to fail the vertical line test terribly because it does hit two different values. So the value at f of 2, if a such thing actually existed, would have to be either the -3 or the +4. But my argument here would be it's not a function anyway, so this isn't really a good question to even pose. And I guess that's actually it. I've answered all the students' questions, and I hope that that cleared things up for all of you.